send Stinger missiles over to them so they can defend themselves better. But remember that Zelensky is a thug. Remember that the Ukrainian government is incredibly corrupt, and it is incredibly evil, and it has been pushing woke ideologies.
Woke ideologies, yes, the very, very woke nation of Ukraine. That was North Carolina Republican Congressman Madison Cawthorn telling a group of his supporters the Ukrainian president is a thug and his government is corrupt. Now, it is unclear exactly when the video was taken, although it talks about sending Stinger missiles, so presumably after the invasion had started. We reached out to Cawthorn's office for more context. They told us he supports Ukraine, but said the Ukrainian president, quote, recently used false propaganda to entice America into becoming involved in an overseas conflict. Cawthorn's not alone. For years, that view has been kind of a mainstream Republican talking point. It goes all the way back to Donald Trump. A huge part of the Trump story was the false counter-narrative that it was Ukrainians who sabotaged the 2016 election, not Russia. He used a very real and historic corruption in the Ukrainian government as a kind of excuse in his attempts to deflect from his own campaign's engagement with Russian actors, even pushing the fake conspiracy theory, totally invented, that a Ukrainian company was involved in hacking Hillary Clinton's emails. And you saw this through line in his first impeachment defense, that Ukraine was some sort of corrupt non-entity, a suspect puppet nation being used to bring him down or pull the U.S. into war. And then on the other side of things were people like our then ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch. She was fired by Trump, pulled out of Kyiv in the middle of the night, all because of a similar disinformation campaign, that she had tried to shield corrupt Ukrainians from prosecution, that she was disloyal to Donald Trump. Those smears did not stop her. Back in November 2019, during Trump's first impeachment hearing, Yovanovitch made the case the U.S. should continue to support Ukraine.
Ukraine, with an enormous landmass and a large population, has the potential to be a significant commercial and political partner for the United States, as well as a force multiplier on the security side. We see the potential in Ukraine. Russia by contrast, sees the risk. Supporting Ukraine is the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do. If Russia prevails and Ukraine falls to Russian dominion, we can expect to see other attempts by Russia to expand its territory and its influence.
In her new book, Lessons from the Edge, the former ambassador gives a first-hand account of her 34-year career in the Foreign Service, including her fateful last days as ambassador to Ukraine. And Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch joins me now. It's really great to have you here. Thank you. How much do you think, I mean, it's funny when you go back, not funny, it's strange when you go back and look at that impeachment, you look about the axis of debate that happened through all those years, how much Ukraine was sort of at the front of it, and how much this axis of Ukraine and Russia was at the front of it, and in front of a lot of propaganda and disinformation as well. How related do you think that is to where we find ourselves now?
Well, I think that, you know, one of the things that happens is with Russia, whether it's a military tactic or military doctrine or disinformation or a cyber attack, they try those things first in Ukraine. And then they expanded outward to Europe and to the United States. And I think we've seen that with meddling in elections, with various disinformation campaigns, and so on and so forth. And as you rightly pointed out, the false narrative that somehow Ukraine was to blame for the meddling in U.S. elections, I mean, that is straight out of Vladimir Putin's playbook. I mean, this was the narrative he was advancing, and that somehow caught on in parts of the United States. Well, very dangerous.
More than somehow. I mean, it made it, I mean, it was the operating, I mean, the President of the United States repeatedly said it. He sent his emissary to Ukraine to basically fire you in the middle of the night because he believed it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think back on that. And it's dangerous. And, you know, fast forward to today, where I think that the way President Trump handled our relationship with Ukraine when the transcript was released of the perfect phone call, I think that gave Vladimir Putin a lot of encouragement that the United States was, you know, certainly not the Trump administration, was going to be supporting Ukraine. And I think it gave other bad actors around the world kind of the green light to move forward with you know, their various schemes, because it was evident that this administration was ready to trade our national security for personal favors.
You spent 34 years in the Foreign Service, a variety of postings around the world. Obviously, you know, at some level, there's always some crisis happening in the world. I mean, you know, that's just the nature of human beings on the planet. But this does seem different in its own category. And I wonder, given your long experience in American foreign policy, if this feels to you like something new and different and a crisis at a different level.
It is, I think, a continuation of what we've seen in the past, but I think it is new and different in the sense that this is a hinge moment in history. So this is about Ukraine. I think Putin has had an obsession about Ukraine, an obsession to get Ukraine back into the empire, and I think other former republics are probably also in line for the same kind of fate if he's successful in Ukraine. And I think, moreover, he's made quite clear that he doesn't like the international rules-based order, that this is something that doesn't work for him because you have to follow rules like the concept of sovereignty, the concept of inviolability of borders, and so forth. And that stands in the way of him getting what he wants.
I hear it international rules-based order, and I understand it in the most charitable sense as an aspirational vision. But honestly, the closest thing I could compare to this is what the U.S. did to Iraq in 2003. I mean, when you talk about sovereignty, I mean, we just decided to invade a nation while a lot of the world said, that's a terrible idea, you definitely shouldn't do that, that will be terrible. And we were able to do it because we have nuclear weapons in the world superpower. And a lot of people, I think, when they hear the phrase rules-based international order, what they hear is the U.S. essentially conveniently using a phrase that allows it to do what it wants.
Well, I'm not going to defend the decision to go into Iraq by any means, but just because one mistake was made doesn't justify another mistake.
Well, certainly, no.
Especially at such great cost to the Ukrainian people. But maybe I'm still an idealist despite everything, but I do believe that the institutions that were set up after World War II, I mean, over the decades, the rules that sometimes are only observed in the breach, but are mostly observed, have ushered in an era for not just the United States, but have ushered in an era of unparalleled prosperity, security, and freedom. And so I think that's a good thing. And I think if the world starts following the path of Vladimir Putin, we are going to be less prosperous, certainly less secure, and have far fewer freedoms.
Yes, I mean, I think a world where lots of people are invading their neighbors all the time and everyone's cutting off trade and we sort of draw back is
cyber attacks,
super horrifying. Yeah, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about what the sort of alliances look like now and how that might be brought to bear towards an end game here, if you'll stick around. Marie Yovanovitch, who's got a new book out, stick around.